All right, everybody. Hey, welcome to this edition of Talkin Hockey. I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. And before I get into breaking everything down, this is going to be maybe the final show of the season, but we'll just see how that plays out. Let me go and introduce my co-host, the man with a plan. He knows everything you ever want to know about hockey somewhere deep in Eastern Canada in an undisclosed location. Launy Schwartz of Hockey54.com. Here he comes, Lightning Launy Schwartz. Launy, what's happening, man?
If I was a boxer, Lightning Launy Schwartz would most certainly be my moniker coming to the ring.
Yeah, and a fitting one it would be. I could imagine you throwing jabs and left hooks like no other, man.
Well, you know, Manny Pacquiao's been ducking me for quite some time, and, you know, that Mayweather guy, he doesn't even talk about me. That's how scared he is of Lightning Launy Schwartz.
Yeah. Well, as long as you fought Pacquiao and you got the same judges that were in there when he fought Bradley, I think you'd have a pretty good chance of winning that fight.
Yeah, that's true. You know, if I land 100 less punches, I might just very well beat the most, renowned fighter in the world, pound for pound there is.
Yeah,
but,
it was
any which way.
It was a bold strategy by
Bradley,
hockey,
not boxing,
but it paid off, yes. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're done. We talked about the Stanley Cup and the Kings, and I've glowed over it, and but it's time to move on, get on to some other things here. So, the end of the season, it's about, the NHL Awards and the draft all take place within a couple of days of each other. We kind of handicapped the NHL Awards last week, so, it's time to really sort of see how we did, and I think we talked about not only, talking about who we thought would win, but it's about when you pick the awards, picking who you think everybody else is going to pick versus who you think should really win. And that's where the...
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did okay with this. I didn't have the help of the Launy this time because there were too many variables to go on, but... I think we both kind of fared similarly in terms of how the awards went and who we thought should win, who we thought will win. Mm-hmm. Although, again, I go to the Norris Trophy right away, and Karlsson won, right? Karlsson wins from Ottawa. And Eric's a cool guy, real cool cat. And by the way, just to footnote this, Team Frölunda was most definitely representing, if you are unfamiliar, Frölunda, one of the teams in the Swedish Elite League, and Karlsson winning, Alfredsson winning, and Lundqvist, who we'll touch on later with the Vezina winning. Team Frölunda represent again. Look at that. Maybe there's some Swedish mafia ties going on. I don't know. If I speak too much about it, they might find my undisclosed location here in Eastern Canada. So, I don't know. I'm going to lay my hands off that one there. But, no, I'm joking. But Karlsson winning, I think, begs the question even more, as we touched on in the preview, about whether or not we should introduce the Bobby Orr Award for the most offensively gifted defenseman, and someone like Shea Weber, who for the second year in a row, most people will say, was robbed, because last year Lidstrom won his seventh to tie the all-time great Doug Harvey. And this year, Weber comes up just a touch shy. Like, it was close again. That close. It was like a whisker of a cat between the two in terms of voting. And Karlsson came out on top. So, can we argue that one? Can we say, oh, it was a huge injustice?
Well, you know what? I think
Not really.
I think it comes down to this. And Weber, to me, is becoming kind of a Norris Trophy stepchild here, because we all know that he should have won it last year when Lidstrom won it. As great as Lidstrom was, it's about who had the better season that season as opposed to who has had the better career. Lidstrom kind of got a gold watch last year when he won that. Now, it was one of the questions I posed to one of my colleagues when I was in Vegas at the awards, and I said, so, if a tree falls in the forest in Nashville, does anyone in the NHL actually hear it? And I think the answer is no. Shea Weber is becoming a Norris Trophy stepchild here. He should have two in a row and be working on his third next season if we have a season. But, it's got to be a little disappointing to him.
Absolutely. I was just saying, the poor guys like Brad Park, although Brad Park had the luxury of playing in the era that was Bobby Orr.
Right.
But Weber, yeah, he's just a dominating force on the blue line. I mean, what adjective can you not ascribe to him? He's steady on the blue, scores timely power play goals.
Right.
He's a physical dominance in every facet of the game. I mean, he may not be as vicious as, say, Scott Stevens. Right? But he is that prototypical power defenseman. Everybody talks about power forward. Maybe we could start attributing that to the likes of a Shea Weber, a power D, guy who will score some timely goals and really lay guys out when he has to, and as steady can be when it comes to being on the blue.
Well, he's Scott Stevens light, I think we should say. And that is not a slight by any stretch of the imagination, because Scott Stevens is really kind of he was a one-of-a-kind. But let's go ahead, and I think we both know how good Shea Weber is, and he's got my vote. If it was up to me, he would have won it the last 2 years, but it's not up to me, so he didn't, and he's still working on his first one. So good luck in the future there, Shea.
Speaking of not up to us. Speaking of not up to us, we can go through most of the awards because it certainly isn't, but I think the one that I was a little bit off on, and I was kind of pulling at the heartstrings a little bit because I really like Stamkos, and I thought maybe he'd be the dark horse amongst his peers for the Lester B, now known as the Ted Lindsay Award, as the MVP as voted upon by his peers. But look, Gino pulls the deuce, if you want to say this trifecta, because he also has the Art Ross and wins the Hart and the Ted Lindsay Award.
Yeah.
And does he deserve it? Again, hard to argue he didn't. Crosby was gone almost all season, and Pittsburgh was the most offensively gifted, and I use the word dominant again because what other word can you use? Most goals in the NHL this year, Pittsburgh Penguins. And Malkin was the engine behind it. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
Kudos to him.
And I think that, it was one of those where you have Stamkos, who he's just become really a force. And I'm really kind of, I'm kind of proud of him for the way that he has done this. He fought through, like last season, going through a little bit of a slump and stuff, and then he's just come back stronger. This season, even stronger. So he's going to be a force. He's going to be one of those special goal scorers that we'll be able to enjoy for many years to come. But yeah, when you look at what Malkin did, though, he was just in beast mode all season long. So I think he deserved that award on both fronts. And it's kind of unfortunate for Stamkos that he had the type of year he had in a year where Malkin had the type of year that he had. Because Stamkos, had he had this year, maybe last year or the year before, I think he would have, he probably would have won it.
Yeah, he was what made Tampa moderately successful this year. I know they missed the playoffs, but without 60 goals, like, they're not even a threat to anybody in the league, and that's why I was favoring Stamkos as a dark horse. But yeah, Malkin. Like, I'm not going to sit here and bemoan the decision. It's Yevgeny Malkin. It's not like they went down the list and, picked some guy who was a third liner, which, by the way, would never happen. Of course, I'm using the greatest sense of hyperbole. That's my big word, hyperbole. I'm going to throw that out.
You've been in that thesaurus again, huh?
Yes, I sat down and read the thesaurus this morning.
All right. Well,
that's how my vocabulary and lexicon is so strong. Thesaurus reading.
Let's go ahead and we'll move on a little bit here. Unless you have another capper to put on that on the MVP award.
Nothing to really cap that off. I mean, what more can you say about it? The next award, I think both of us were really on the same page about in the preview show, was the Jack Adams.
Right.
I think it's really unfortunate how the Jack Adams gets awarded year over year now. In most cases, it ends up being the coach that took a team that was in the doldrums at the beginning of the season. Coach gets fired 10 games in, maybe 20 games in, and then brings them into playoff contention or top of their division or what have you. And I think that was really, really unjust in the sense that Paul McLean, being the coach of the Ottawa Senators, and if you missed the preview show, first of all, I shake my finger at you. Second of all, Paul McLean brought a team. I can't stress this enough, okay? Sorry, I was coaching this morning, and my voice just crackled a little bit there.
Okay.
I can't stress this enough. The Ottawa Senators were expected to be one of the worst teams in the entire league, and they made the playoffs with the rookie head coach.
Right.
And the St. Louis Blues, on the flip side, with a bunch of young talent showing a lot of potential for success this year, came out of the gate and fell flat onto the ice, a la Kevin Stevens, from the playoffs. And that, to me, I think, again, it's every year. Look at almost every year. Barry Trotz, over the last several years, has taken a team where the salary cap was scraping the bottom of the barrel. They spent near the minimum every year, and yet what did the Nashville Predators always do? Compete, compete, compete.
Right.
And it was against tough competition. Yet Trotz has no Adams. Why did I say Norris? No Adams Trophy to show for it.
Because you were thinking Nashville, and that's where Shea Weber has no Norris.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's just I think we need, as a hockey community, if you will, shift our focus on how we reward certain talent, and the Adams is definitely part of that thought process, because it's just real. Your team wasn't so crappy that you brought them to the playoffs, so we can't really give you the award for best coach.
Right, and and then you look at we got Coach of the Year, and then you got GM of the Year also, which is how was that not Dale Talon?
Another team where nobody was expecting anything, nothing, like less than nothing. It was like, all right, it's the Florida Panthers. They're not going to make the playoffs again this year.
Right.
I think at the beginning of every year, everybody pretty much says, okay, so let's look at the Eastern Conference. We can pretty much chuck Maple Leafs. Oh, yeah, and forget about the Islanders, Carolina Hurricanes, and, oh, yeah, there's a team in Florida that's also bunk.
Yeah.
So, yeah, whatever. And then look what happens. Talon comes in. Within a couple of years, everything's looking ship-shape with some smart trades and good drafting. And what does he get for it? No recognition.
Exactly. Just a clean sweep in St. Louis is what happened. And I looked at it, and we said, Ken Hitchcock, he is, as we talked about, the high-profile guy. And honestly, for those of you listening, this is not to take anything away from what Hitchcock did in St. Louis, because, like Launy said, he goes in, he does his Hitchcock thing, and, they were contenders. Definitely, almost contenders for the President's Trophy down the stretch there. So he did a great job. But you look at the others involved in there, and hey, it was a little bit of a popularity contest. We kind of knew Tortorella wouldn't win it because of the talent on his roster.
Yeah, that's the caveat I have about those kinds of awards being awarded to those winners. You don't take. I'm not trying to take away from it. It is an accomplishment.
Right, right.
But when you look at the whole painting of the season and see if there was a shade of red that wasn't going to be on the board, it was that Ottawa Senators shade of red. And yet it was there at the end of the year. And again, bringing out some of the best in some of the players that have underachieved to a lot of people over the years, namely Jason Spezza. So, any which way.
Yeah. So
on to the next one, right?
Let's move on.
Let's move on, because there's still so much more to talk about, and the award that is close to your heart and especially close to mine, the Vezina. The Vezina. Because we can talk about the Selke and the Lady Byng. I mean, come on. Campbell won it. He had 6 penalty minutes all year long, and he had the most ice time in the NHL.
Right.
6 minutes, most ice time. Do the math. Are you going to really complain about that award? Not at all.
No.
Deserved it.
No.
No.
And plus, it's Brian Campbell.
Was your pick for the Selke.
Go ahead.
If I'm not mistaken.
I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying, Bergeron was your pick for the Selke, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
and he blindsided the great Pavel Datsyuk, the Houdini of hockey.
Well, I think
Look at that. Bergeron pulls off a magic trick of his own.
Yeah, you know, Datsyuk, and this was another thing being discussed. Now, is Datsyuk, he has some of the most memorable takeaways ever, every season. But when you start looking at it shift by shift, you know, is he, and again, not to take anything away from him, but is it because when he does some of the things that he does, they're so spectacular and so Datsyukian and just things that only he could do, that maybe he has that wow factor that goes for him and, you know, tilts things in his, you know, in his favor every year when it comes to us, you know, winning the Selke.
But Bergeron pulls it off.
Yeah.
And good, you know what, good for him, because he's had some adversity that he's faced throughout his career in terms of injuries and concussions and whatnot. But we were originally going to talk about the Vezina. I just wanted to throw in a couple of the other major awards that were the Selke and Bing. But the big one for me, and close to you because Quick was in there, and we discussed it, the one award that is not based on votes by the Professional Hockey Writers Association is the Vezina, and that's from the GMs. And there's politics at its finest, folks. If you've ever paid any attention to how this award has worked over the years, much as I have, it's that politics plays a huge role. There were years where Martin Brodeur was statistically better than Hasek, but it was sexier to give Hasek the award because everybody, for some obscene reason, fawned all over him. I'm not one of them. But here we have a season where, yes, if Quick won, I'm not sure anybody would have gone, whoa, hold on a second. Look at the numbers and how different they are. Again, to bring back where we were at the very beginning of the show, that's a Pacquiao-Bradley decision there. No. If Quick won, I'm pretty to finally be awarded with the Vezina, and this was the year. And it could happen a couple of more times over the next few years. Only 30. Think about that. He has almost 10 more years left on that body in terms of what it can hold up in the NHL. And he's probably going to win a few more Vezinas. And a kid like Quick will maybe fall in between and win a couple here and there. But if Lundqvist stays healthy, we're going to see a dominant run from King Henrik, no doubt, right? Yeah, Am I wrong? Am I off the mark on this?
No, I think you're right, and I think the other thing he has working for him is that, you know, he plays on not just for an Eastern Conference team, but he plays for the Rangers. So you got the high-profile thing going on, and, you know, the problem with the West Coast is that when Jonathan Quick is playing, in the majority of the games that he plays all year long, all those East Coast writers are in bed by the time the game starts, because on the East Coast it doesn't start until 10:30 at night. So a lot of them just miss the whole season of Jonathan Quick, but they get to see every game Lundqvist plays. And Lundqvist is a terrific goaltender, by the way.
Half the GMs are asleep.
Right, I'm sorry. Yes.
PWH.
Exactly.
But yes. Half the general managers, I would say, tend to be asleep, and their scouts don't exactly come in and say, hey, did you hear about that Quick guy? I mean, they'll hear about it, but yeah, you're right, you know. It's everybody gets to watch the showpiece that is the New York Rangers, right? So, anyway.
And Lundqvist,
it's politics, it's how it works.
Right, and Lundqvist, too, I think.
It's a prime example of how it works.
Yeah, the way it is with Lundqvist, too, is the way that he plays. He plays a style that really, you know, dancing right on the goal line. So it's not about him coming out, cutting down angles and things. So his style is a little bit more, I mean, Quick is an aggressive guy. And Lundqvist even talked about this when he was, you know, talking in the wake of having won the award. You got Quick who's out there, you know, cutting down angles and stuff, whereas Lundqvist just sits there, you know, on the goal line and just stops everything you throw at him.
And he is pretty darn good in that capacity.
Yeah.
And he's got the hardware to prove it now. So, hey, that is how it works. We just have to sit back and accept it. It's not a situation where we're seeing a one-hit wonder a la Steve Penny or Jim Carrey, and maybe not to pick on the guy because he did have a really strong career, but an Olaf Kolzig where there's a one-off. We're going to see a string of dominance from all three goaltenders. That's the word of the day, dominance. We're going to see a string of that for many years to come from the likes of Rene, Quick, and Lundqvist. We're going to be hearing those three names when the Vezina comes up an awful lot, and the league's good for it.
Absolutely.
The league is absolutely good for it. Call it a passing of the torch from the era of Brodeur onto these three guys. Something special. And Carey Price. I can't forget about Carey Price in there. Sorry.
There you go. All right. So, the other one is, we talked about the Calder Trophy, which...
And you hit that one on the head, brother.
Landeskog, the consistency all year long. Nugent Hopkins was kind of, he was a little up and down. And then Adam Henrique, I think, were it graded as far as what he did late in the season and come playoff time, it would have been different, but it's just based on the regular season. And I thought, through the year, Landeskog was the most consistent of all of them, through the year. And
that's the best way to look at it, because we both agreed. I think everybody who paid even an iota of a decision to the league is if Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was healthy all year, he would have been like Usain Bolt. He would have run way past at full speed on the finish line. But Landeskog very deserving, and look, it's just an example of some more good young talent that is in the league right now, and it's probably a good segue to talk a little bit about the draft, is it not? Going Calder to draft, wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree, because that the draft is where it all starts, and unfortunately, out here on West Coast and everything, we don't get to see a whole lot of junior hockey out here. So maybe some international stuff here and there, but a lot of the names are just, for us, names. You got names and stats, and we have no idea if their game, and there's a lot of phenomenal players in juniors and that play in the A, but a lot of them wind up being, tweeners who have a game that does not translate to the NHL level. But, that said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the NHL draft here.
Well, a lot of people said it was a weak class, and I'm not exactly going to sit here and say I am the expert on junior hockey. There are a couple of names that I kind of defer to. Russ Cohen of Sportsology is definitely one of the guys who knows prospects as good as anyone. So Russ is a great guy to always turn to for information like that. And one of the writers at Hockey 54 is Brian Teal, and he's really up on the Ontario Hockey League. So he's very familiar with a lot of the goings-on in the junior ranks. But from what I know and what I base my opinions on is that this was a good draft year. You saw some interesting picks. Nail Yakupov going first overall to Edmonton, which to some people was a bit of a head-scratcher, because I'm pretty confident that up front that they're doing okay in Edmonton. They could have gone the route of Ryan Murray, who was playing, if I'm not mistaken, in the World. Needed a defenseman, but hey, they went with the philosophy of quote unquote the best guy available, and that is Nail Yakupov, who played with the Ontario Hockey League's Sarnia Sting. But did they really need another right winger?
Well,
you got to ask that question.
When we look at it that way, that was one of the things when we look at the Oilers when they built that dynasty back in the 80s. And one of their things they said was, we always took the best player available regardless of position. So even if you wind up with maybe a glut, so to speak, at a certain position, still, you may have, it creates competition, which will push those players to play better. Otherwise, you have some trade bait. But when you look at something like what the Oilers did. If you look at their draft years between 1980 and, say, 1984, and look at all the players they got, you would look at it and say, what, were all the other scouts asleep or what? Because it is amazing the team they put together just in those years.
Well, we'll see what the youth movement in NHL. I was about to say NHL. It's just a single entity. The youth movement in Edmonton. I don't even understand how I could have confused those two together. But anyway, I did. Forgive me, please. But there's a good youth movement. PRV Svensson or Svensson PRV, Magnus PRV, however he wanted to be called, didn't work out for Edmonton, and they've kind of just let him go by the wayside. But when you have the nucleus of Nugent Hopkins, Taylor Hall, undoubtedly Jordan Eberle, and we'll see if Yakupov can be part of that young core moving forward. They could be a very dangerous team, but on the back end, they're very, very weak, and they got to address that somehow because, when they're going to have to dish out big money to these guys when their contracts are starting to come up, especially, I would say Eberle, mind you, because like that kid, I think, is the main talent on that team.
Right.
Taylor Hall has been good, but Jordan Eberle's been something really, really special. And I just, the defense is a big deal. And that to me is something they really, really should have addressed. But we could talk about that in more detail another time, I'm sure, because Edmonton can be a centerpiece all unto itself when you talk about things.
Well, let me ask you something. When you talk about the back end, though, one of the trades that happened, and that was you have Lubomir Visnovsky, who's 35, going to the New York Islanders for a second-round pick. Now, Lubo obviously is much closer to the end of his career than the beginning. So do the Islanders have a team yet where they need someone like Visnovsky to come in and do what exactly? That was a little curious for me.
I'm really not terribly sure when it comes to a team like the New York Islanders because, first of all, they're the New York Islanders.
Right.
I feel bad for them because you got a guy in Tavares who's an amazing talent and is definitely the guy who's going to help right the course. But we've been waiting for that to happen for a long time. Like, is this team that damaged from Mike Milbury still? You have to ask that question. And it almost seems as though it is because Gar Snow hasn't done much better to put together a better team. And I just sit there and shake my head. This is the New York Islanders. This is a team that in the early 1980s was the definition of dynasty. They took it from the Habs, and then it was handed over to the Oilers, and we haven't really seen anything like that since.
Right.
And it's really too bad to see a team with that kind of heritage struggle the way they have, and then to say is Visnovsky, what's going to propel them forward with the likes of Matt Molson, Grabner, and
John
Tavares.
Yes.
I wish I had an answer to that because it seems to be like the New York Islanders are an abyss of no answers.
Right. And you know what? You have inspired me. Here's what we're going to do now. As everyone knows, there's any show like this, we have what we call pre-production meetings, which means before the production, we talk about what we're going to talk about. We were going to talk about these trades and things as kind of a capper here, but looking at the time, I think what we should do, take this next week where undoubtedly there's going to be some more trades, and we come back with a show next week on the moves that happened post-draft day.
I think you hit that one right out of the park because there were some really cool trades. It's coming up on free agency where trades tend to heat up because you don't want to lose a guy for nothing.
Exactly.
So I like that. Next week, Canada Day is next week, July 1st. So next Sunday, a lot of action could be happening, a lot of signage going on. Ryan Suter, Detroit.
And
Sorry,
what is going to happen with
Parise?
What is going to happen with Parise? What?
There's a lot of questions. Next week we get a couple answers, hopefully on July 1st.
All right, perfect. So, and folks, that's how shows come about. Sometimes it just springs about organically, and you just saw an organic process happen right here before your eyes on the air on Talkin Hockey. All right, Launy.
Charles. Thank you very much for cutting it short like you did, because if we went on, I might have missed my friend's wedding this evening the way we were going.
All right, man. So I'll tell you what, Launy, go ahead to that wedding, enjoy it, and as we say here in the United States, drink responsibly. Or if someone else is driving, drink irresponsibly.
Well, I will be the responsible one because I have valuable passengers in my car, and when I say passenger, I mean one, and that would be Dahlia Kurtz.
Yes.
So I got to take good care of the lady on the way home from the wedding tonight. But
don't let anything happen,
Lil D. Yeah, nothing can happen to her. And I think we're leading out of this show with an awesome piece we put together from the red carpet. So I'm really excited to see how that's all put together too. So, we get caught up talking hockey, Charles. How does this happen? Half hour goes by like it's 5 minutes.
It does. Absolutely, man. All right, so there we go. And as Launy said, just put together a little something from the NHL Awards show. And, some very cool interviews in here. For those of you who are into the beautiful ladies, Erin Andrews was interviewed. And for those of you who like short commissioners, Gary Bettman was interviewed. And for those of you who like GMs who should have won GM of the Year but didn't, Dale Talon is interviewed. And for those of you who like the celebrities, Cheryl Burke from Dancing with the Stars, and also Michael Vartan, actor, was interviewed as well. He's a big Kings fan. So you know what? There's nothing else I can say here. Let's just go ahead and let it roll.
Well, the fact that we can bring the NHL family, all our guests here, and celebrate the accomplishments of the season, everybody who's been here with us is thrilled to be here. They think it's a fun place to be. Steve Wynn and the Wynn properties have been phenomenal. So this is all good.
Excellent.
I had a girlfriend in high school that liked the mustache, so I kept it. But I married her too, so that makes it even better.
Oh, this is very special to me. I started my career in the NHL. I was sidelined for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Torts was our head coach. Richie was on the team. They won a cup, and I was on the ice covering it for the ESPN. So the Lightning. But the NHL is very, very close to my heart. It's really what molded me as a broadcaster, really taught me some tough love skills with a lot of people. And, these guys put so much on the line day in, day out with their injuries and how hard they played, sacrificing their bodies. It's shaped me all the way.
And so if anyone gets in your way, you'll just body check.
Well, I usually do. And then if anyone complains about an injury, I'm like, don't talk to me, because these guys are playing with like 4 head injuries and like ACLs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. You good?
Dale Talon, how are you? Doing the same great job that you did in Chicago and now putting together a squad there in Florida.
Well, that's the goal. We're pretty well on pace, maybe a little ahead of schedule after the year we had, but we're going to develop through the draft and use our prospects properly and do exactly what we did in Chicago and hopefully have the same success.
All right, what would you say is that? What makes that Dale Talon mystique? The thing that makes you, you?
I have no idea. I just like to have a lot of fun, communicate openly with our players, and we're able to get everybody on the same page, and everybody has input into whether we have success or not.
To be nominated and trying to enjoy it all, take everything in. Well, it's still feeling pretty acute and intense, and I'm still riding the cup run high. Just being here is really cherry on the cake, but yeah, it's been a 37-year journey for me. I've been rooting for this team, and I cried. I'm not embarrassed to say it. I really, really cried, and when I got home that night with my wife, cried a lot, and she didn't really understand where it was all coming from. I assured her it was from a good place. Don't worry, it's nothing weird. But no, it's when you follow a team for so long, and they get close a couple times, and this team especially. There's such a close knit group, and I know some of the guys now. I've been fortunate enough to meet some of them, and they feel like my team. You know, obviously they're not, but those are my boys. They did it. It's amazing.
Will you cry again if they win next year?
I don't know about that. This is the first year I've ever had season tickets. So, you know, being there for this entire run was amazing. And the ticket rep called me the other day actually and said, "Are you planning on renewing?" I thought, well, yeah, sure, I'd like to, but it doesn't get any better than this. You know, it's kind of like, why spend all that money? Maybe I'll just go to 10 games. I'll go to the first game for the raising of the banner, you know, and if they get close, maybe I'll break the piggy bank for some postseason action. But probably, I don't know. Well, I probably will. What am I saying? Of course I'm going to. It's amazing. It was amazing. It was amazing. And the last 10 minutes, to be able to enjoy it as opposed to nail-biting the whole time, overtime. And, you know, if you look at all the other teams that win, you really feel like that's their cup.
Yeah.
This was such a cup for the organization, for Marcel Dion, for Charlie Simmer, for Jim Fox, for Gretzky, for Bob Miller, for all those guys. And the only thing that sucked was that Bob didn't get to call a game. For him to been able to call Game 6 live would have been phenomenal.
At the beginning of the year, I thought they'd be a Final Four contender, and then obviously once you get to the Final Four, anything can happen. But they no way should have been an 8 seed. They're a tremendous talent. Obviously, going forward, they got a chance to be extremely good. So I'm not surprised that they did as well as they did.
How good can Jonathan Quick be?
He can be as good as anybody in the league. As long as he can keep his health, he can be as good as anybody in the league. He's that good a player.
Excellent.
Thank you.
John Q. Hey, man, and got your Stanley Cup. Now walking the red carpet.
It feels great. It's having a lot of fun, and you know, it's all about just kind of celebrating the season that the league had, and you know, some of the greatest players in the world are walking around here, and it's pretty cool.
It'd be amazing. I mean, it's an honor in itself just to be nominated for those awards. So.
You love Dancing with the Stars now that you've seen him. Any hockey players here you got your eye on to get on the show?
Well, she just said Jeremy Roenick. She said that he would be great because he's retired and he can dance. I guess there's some YouTube videos of him dancing. I'd be really interested to seeing that.
Well, what about a guy like Jonathan Quick? We've seen how limber he is.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, anyone that would be willing to do this. I mean, Dancing with the Stars is a huge commitment, first of all. We've only had football players and basketball players, so I think it's time for a hockey player.